All right, we're at that point in the NFL season where one thing becomes crystal clear: regret. Today, we're diving into the big decisions that teams are absolutely wishing they could have a do-over on. Can you believe it? We are more than halfway through the 2025 season, and you know what that means? The real contenders are starting to pull away from the pretenders. And with that kind of clarity, you get a whole lot of front office regret. Decisions that were made months ago, well, they're having huge consequences right now. And believe me, some teams are paying a very, very steep price.
So first up, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They made a trade way back in May that, honestly, just looks worse and worse with every single passing week. They sent away a super talented, sometimes controversial player. The question is, did they totally get fleeced?
I mean, just look at this. The contrast is absolutely staggering. Over in Dallas, George Pickens is playing like a legitimate all-pro. He's on pace for over 1,500 yards. And then you look back at Pittsburgh, their second leading receiver has barely cracked 200 yards. It's night and day. There is just no doubt Pickens would be helping this team win games right now.
And here's where it really starts to sting. Pickens is playing for a new contract, a massive payday. The top guys at his position are now getting over $40 million a year. Now, even if the Steelers were never going to pay that, letting him play out his contract and leave in free agency would have likely gotten them a high compensatory draft pick. That's basically a free bonus pick from the league.
And for a player making that kind of impact, this is the return they got? A couple of lottery tickets that won't pay off for years. Look, I get the thinking, right? Pickens had some maturity stuff, maybe he wasn't in their long-term vision, but for a team that's trying to win now, trading away that kind of talent for a couple of maybes feels like a huge, huge miscalculation.
And speaking of miscalculations, let's head over to Buffalo and talk about the Bills. They came into the season with legit Super Bowl aspirations, but a whole series of questionable moves at wide receiver has left a massive, gaping hole in their offense.
You can almost see the dominoes falling here. In March, they shell out a big contract for Curtis Samuel, who just hasn't been effective. At the exact same time, they let a cheap, dependable guy like Mac Hollins walk away to a rival. Then, they go and use a high draft pick on Keon Coleman, who has been a major disappointment. It's just 3 bad decisions that created one giant problem.
And you know it's a real problem when the frustration starts spilling out inside the locker room, when your veteran leader on the offensive line, Dion Dawkins, says this publicly about a second-round pick. A guy who's been a healthy scratch? Oof, that tells you the situation is bad. It's a terrible look, and it really makes you wonder about Keon Coleman's future in Buffalo.
So what's the end result of all this? Well, the Bills' offense has basically become a 2-man operation. It is the Josh Allen and James Cook show, and everybody else is just kind of there. That is a really risky way to live during the regular season, and it's an even bigger gamble heading into the playoffs, where every single weakness you have gets put under a microscope.
Okay, next up, the reigning champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. When you're trying to build a dynasty, you'd think every little move would be scrutinized. But this year, they let a legitimate game-changing weapon slip right through their fingers over what seems like a tiny disagreement.
I mean, just look at how close this was. At the trade deadline, the Jets were dangling star running back Breece Hall. The asking price? A 3rd-round pick. The Chiefs were reportedly only willing to give up a 4th. For real? When you're going for a 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, are you really going to let a deal like that die over the difference between a 3rd and a 4th? Hindsight is screaming, no.
And the difference in what you're getting on the field is just massive. Breece Hall is an explosive, top-tier running back. The Chiefs, they're getting by with Isaiah Pacheco averaging just 41 yards a game and a 30-year-old Kareem Hunt chipping in 35. A great running game is a quarterback's best friend, and right now, Patrick Mahomes just doesn't have one.
And here's the fallout. Their franchise quarterback, 30 years old in his 9th season, is having to run the ball more than ever before in his career. That is the last thing you want. You don't want your most valuable player in the entire league taking extra hits because the front office haggled over a day 3 draft pick. It was a completely preventable problem, and you can bet they regret it.
You know, not all regrets are about missing out on superstars. Sometimes it's about a total failure to plan for something you know is coming. And that brings us to the Minnesota Vikings and their, well, let's call it a chaotic approach to the backup quarterback spot.
Just try to follow the logic here, because this sequence of moves just screams we have no idea what we're doing. They go get Sam Howell in the draft, only to ship him out a few months later after a bad preseason.
Then they're scrambling, signing Carson Wentz right before the season kicks off. It's just a messy, unserious approach to arguably the most important position in all of sports.
And what has to be so frustrating if you're a Vikings fan is that there were simple, smart solutions right there for the taking. A guy like Mac Jones, who's proven he can step in and win games, signed a super affordable 2-year, $8 million deal. The Vikings chose chaos over competence, and that is a decision I'm sure they're kicking themselves for.
All right, finally, let's group two teams together because their biggest regrets start right at the top. For the Tennessee Titans and the Las Vegas Raiders, a year of instability and some really questionable coaching decisions basically derailed their seasons before they'd ever got off the ground.
Let's start with the Titans. The warning signs from last season couldn't have been any clearer. I mean, they were in giant, flashing neon lights. They had the worst record in the entire league. They were wildly undisciplined, racking up over 1,000 yards in penalties, and that kind of stuff falls directly on the head coach.
And yet, even with all those red flags waving, they brought head coach Brian Callahan back. And surprise, surprise, the same problems kept happening, and he ended up getting fired mid-season. It was a completely avoidable mess that now leaves their #1 overall draft pick, quarterback Cam Ward, in the hands of an interim coach. Not ideal.
Now in Las Vegas, the regret was a different flavor. The Raiders hired Pete Carroll hoping to get what you might call the Pete Carroll experience, right? The idea that this legendary, high-energy coach could finally bring some stability to a franchise that's just been a revolving door of coaches for years.
But the reality? It has been the complete opposite. The team has looked listless with a real lack of effort, especially on defense. And now it looks like they're going to be searching for yet another head coach after just one season. The experiment completely failed, and it just created more turmoil for a fan base that is desperate for some stability.
So as you can see, regret comes in all shapes and sizes in the NFL. It can be trading away a star player, it can be totally mismanaging a position group, it can be fumbling a key negotiation, or just a complete lack of planning. In a league where the margins are razor thin, any one of these decisions can totally derail your season.
And that really leaves us with the big question. These aren't just problems for this season. These regrets are going to have a domino effect. They're going to shape the playoff picture this year, they're going to influence draft strategy next April, and they could truly alter the entire direction of these franchises for years to come.